So you feel like that you're growing beyond newbie status in this fountain pen hobby, and you want to get pens that are kind of at that next level, right? But they're starting to get a little bit pricier, and you don't want to buy something that's not going to be worth the money. Well, I'm going to give you 7 pens today that I think are going to be great ones you should consider in 2021 to step up your pen game. Hey everyone, my name is Brian Goulet from gouletpens.com, and back in 2015, which seems like a while ago, because it kind of was, I came up with a list of top 7 next level pens, and honestly, the list has not aged so gracefully. 3 of the pens we no longer carry, 2 of them are discontinued altogether. The other ones are still okay, and that part of the list still holds up well, but there's some new stuff that's come out in the last 6 years. I've kind of refreshed some of my opinions, so I thought I would get you a new video today if you're interested in some next level pens. So before we get into it, let me explain what I think next level means, because it's not like an officially defined term in the fountain pen world. Basically, it's those ones that are beyond just kind of your typical introductory fountain pens. So some of these are going to be a little more expensive, but they're going to have maybe some features and some additional, things going on with them that maybe somebody new to pens either wouldn't appreciate or be a bit more complicated. But if you're using pens more regularly, you would really be able to get the most out of some of these pens. So that's kind of where we're going with this. So these are all going to be pens. They're going to be maybe into the $50 and up range, but all sub gold nib level. So in that like $50 to a little over $100 range. All right, so now that we got the context laid out for the video, I'm gonna go ahead and kick it off here in no particular order. Starting off with the Benu Euphoria. Now this pen, if you are familiar with Benu at all, they're all pretty distinctive. I think you could pretty much classify any Benu pen in kind of this next level range. And mostly that's because they're gonna be pretty good quality pens. They're all gonna be solid writers, but it's really the materials and the design overall that makes them that next level. And the Euphoria is a relatively newer offering that they have as of 2021. Most of these pens are going to be pretty flashy. You're going to see a lot of depth of color, a lot of color changes, some glitter, including really, really chunky glitter that you don't see in a lot of other pen materials. You're going to see wild colors, color changing and variation as you turn the pen. It looks really crazy, and it's really pretty distinctively Benu. Euphoria specifically, it's a hexagonal pen, so it's got these facets. That's a little more complicated to manufacture, and you start to get into some of that with these next level pens. So this pen, you're going to be over $100, and part of what you're paying for here really has to do with the material itself. So the fact that it's faceted like that, there's a lot of extra polishing and extra handwork that goes into making the pen have a nice fit and finish with a faceted design like this. And because it's got so many different things going on with the different colors and the glitters and stuff like that, you can imagine the manufacturing process gets more complicated to have it look like this, which is also part of why you don't see many pen companies making pens that look like Benu's. So that's mainly the bulk of what you're paying for, is that design. So the next pen to get into here is the Platinum Procyon. So originally we had the Platinum Cool on the list on the first video. This pen has, I guess, sort of replaced the Cool as that mid-range Platinum pen. So Platinum is really known for their preppy and some of their really inexpensive pens. And then they're also known for their 3776, which gets up towards $200. That's where you get your kind of introductory gold nib pens. But there wasn't really a whole lot in between. And that's sort of what this Procyon is meant to fill. So it's a really good fit and finish of a pen. I like it. It's bigger. It's a little bit heavier than you would get with a preppy. It's got a different nib. Really, it's still a steel nib, but it writes really well. And mainly what you're getting with the Procyon is this cap mechanism. So the slip and seal cap is a really, really good fitting cap that seals the nib up nicely. They tout for a year or more of keeping your nib completely wet without it drying out, which is pretty phenomenal. And I find it to be incredibly handy. Especially if you're writing with this pen a lot, having a nib that's going to stay really wet is really good. And this is a Japanese pen. They tend to grind their fine nibs a little bit finer, and that's the case with the Procyon too. So if you like to get nibs that are a little bit finer, I would go with the fine nib on this one. So this does use Platinum's proprietary converter as well as the cartridge. Unfortunately, it doesn't come with a converter. You got to get that extra, and it's not the cheapest converter out there, but it is a very solid converter. So if you want to get that whole setup, you're still in the sub $100 range. It feels like a more substantial pen than what you're getting with Platinum's less expensive offerings, but yet you're still getting what I feel is a very fairly priced pen. The next one we have up here is the Traveler's Brass Pen, and there's not a whole lot of options on this pen. It's relatively straightforward as to what it is. Originally, it was launched just as literally the brass pen with a fine nib. That's it, no other options. They've since come out with the factory green version, which I think is also pretty cool because you just don't see a lot of pens with this color. I think either format is great. My own preference is for the all brass one because I just kind of like the natural metal. I like the natural patina that can kind of come out with that brass. It is a shiny brass and you can polish it up and keep it looking shiny, but I like to let it age a little bit. And it's kind of cool because you get those options. Nice thing about brass too is it's actually antimicrobial, so that's kind of handy in the COVID world that we find ourselves in, right? So it has a fine nib only on it. It's a stainless steel nib, which normally would seem like a bit of a detraction, but it's such a great writing nib. I find it to be very reliable, always starts up for me, even when I just carry it around in my pocket and kind of abuse it a little bit. So for me, it's a great pen that I keep. Really, it's kind of like an everyday carry pen or a pocket pen. That's really where I think this one shines, and it's super durable. You're not going to really have to worry about your keys, damaging it too much, or you're knocking it around. It's really going to hold up well. I love the cap on this pen as well. It's just a slide-on cap. It's very firm, but yet it slides really easily. So because you have it as kind of a pocket pen, and it's really kind of short to use without the cap on it, you kind of have to post it, but it's super easy to do so. And actually, it's one of my favorite pens to cap and uncap. So the one drawback to this, aside from the nib thing, which honestly, I think the nib is great for what it is. It's really versatile on a lot of different papers, but it's the filling mechanism. It's a small pen, so it doesn't fit any converters. You basically have to use a standard international short cartridge on this pen. Granted, that's the most universal cartridge that's out there, so you have a lot of options. But also, if you have a lot of bottled ink that you really like to use, it can sort of limit you a little bit. So what I do is I use an ink syringe, I refill my empty cartridges, and then I go on my merry way. So there are some workarounds. It's not the end of the world, but it is a little bit of extra hassle. The thing I will say though, because it's got that fine nib, this thing just sips ink. So I don't find myself having to refill it all that often. And because I keep it as really just a pocket pen, I'm just pulling it out every now and then to write quick notes and things like that. I'm not writing novels with it. And I find it perfect kind of for that use, sort of like having a pocket knife. It's like I always want it kind of handy, but I'm not necessarily going to be using it all the time. So I think it's a great pen for that because of the durability, really nice machining, Japanese made. It's really a durable pen. I think it's a fantastic pen for the money. So really the value proposition for this pen is going to be the machined brass. You're not going to find basically any other pen that's going to be a solid machined brass like this anywhere near this price point. It's a really pretty expensive process to do. Brass is not super cheap. It's hard to machine, harder than resin, but it's going to be super durable and last a really, really long time. So I think it's a great pen to kind of invest in and step up into that, especially if you're interested in more metal pens and things like that. This is a great introductory one for that. So the next one I got, we'll kind of keep going with the metal pen thing. So this one is going to be from Kaweco in Germany, and this pen is called the Supra. So they have a smaller one that's called the Lilliput, but this is basically a bigger version of that. Now you're getting into like more of that kind of full machined. They have a brass version, but they also have a stainless steel version, which is honestly pretty darn cool as well. This pen is going to be bigger, it's going to be heavier, and it's going to be a little more expensive. What I really like about the Supra is a couple of things. One is it's got a larger nib. It's got that number 6 size nib. You have more tip size options, so you can get something on the finer side or on the broader side. You have a little bit more versatility there. But also, the very unique thing about the Supra is it has this kind of middle section on the pen that you can either choose to leave in if you want a longer pen, and that allows you to actually fit a full size standard international converter in there, a little easier to use with bottled ink, or you can take that middle section out and you can have a shorter pocket pen, which then of course will only take cartridges, but it's going to be a little bit smaller, maybe a little easier to carry around, a little lighter. So if you have that option to make it more of a pocket pen or a full-size pen. Like the Traveler's pen, because it's a full machine brass and stainless steel, it's also going to be good for hygienic uses, antimicrobial kind of stuff. So if that is important to you, that's going to be a plus on the Supra as well. So what's going to make this pen worth the money is the fit and finish of it, this full machined metal pen. It's kind of expensive and time consuming to make pens like this. So you're going to be into this kind of price range with pretty much any machined pen, but it's very bulky. There's a lot of metal there. I mean, this is a pen that you would be able to drive your car over and it's going to be perfectly fine. So I think part of what you're paying for is that durability and the uniqueness of these metal materials. So the next one I've got on the list here, I'm kind of going to take two different pens and put them into one category here. So this is the TWSBI VAC 700R, and I'll include the VAC Mini in there as well. Basically because you're getting this kind of vacuum filling mechanism. That's mostly what makes these pens so unique. What I like about this as a next level pen is, you know, the vacuum filling thing, it's a bit much for someone who's never used a fountain pen to kind of understand how this works. But one of the things that I find really appealing as somebody who is learning more about different fountain pens is getting to try different filling mechanisms. And this TWSBI, either one of these versions, is a great way to do that at a relatively affordable price point. You're looking in the $60 on up for these different versions. So the way that these vacuum filling pens work is they have essentially the entire body of the pen that fills with ink, and you have this rod that you push down, and that creates a negative pressure inside, that when you push it all the way down, it then sucks ink up into the pen. What's cool about that is that you get a large volume of ink with your pen, larger than your typical cartridge converter for sure, and larger than most of your piston filling pens as well. So with the VACs, they have some different color options, but not a whole ton. That's not really mainly the appeal. Mostly it's the filling mechanism, it's the utility, and they have vacuum filling pens with other brands, but really not anything that's less than several $100s. So that's why I really love these ones, is because it's a great way for you to get to try some vacuum filling pens without having to make as significant investment as you would with some other brands. You also get some good nib size options with TWSBI, anything ranging from an extra fine all the way up to a 1.1 millimeter stub. So you get to kind of fine tune your writing preferences there. And they really write pretty reliably. And the other cool thing about TWSBI is they're pretty easy to service and maintain yourself. They actually include some grease and some wrenches and things like that to be able to disassemble the pen. So as you're learning and getting more comfortable with taking your pens apart and cleaning them thoroughly, I find that TWSBIs are, in general, are a really good pen to try that with because they have some instructions and some tools that make that a little bit easier. All right, so next one on the list we have is the Sailor Compass. This is Sailor's only steel nib option that's been available in the US, and it's a relatively recent offering too. Typically, they've only had gold nibs that have been in the $150 plus range. Well, this pen is really very, very affordable. You're looking in the $30 to $50 range here. What I like about this one is you have a lot of different color options of the pen. They're all translucent demonstrators, which I like because you get to see some of the inner workings of the pen. I always think that's pretty cool, especially when you're still kind of learning how fountain pens work. You get to see how the ink flows down through. It's really kind of nice that way. And then also, this pen comes with a converter too, which is nice because Sailor has their own proprietary converter and cartridges. So the fact that converter's included gives you a little bit of extra value there. And the converter is color matched to the pen, which is also pretty cool and something you don't get with very many pens. Now, as far as the way that it writes, it's not going to be the same nib as what you're going to have in the gold nib Sailors. It's a completely different nib, but it still writes really well, and I think it's a decent introduction into some of what Sailor has to offer. So some of what you're paying for this one is a little bit of that Sailor name. You're getting an introduction to really what is more of an established, I don't know, arguably maybe a more premium brand, but you're getting what I think is a pretty good introduction at a pretty great price as well. Now, it's not going to be the exact same experience you'll get with pens like the Sailor 1911 or the Pro Gear, but I think it's a pretty phenomenal pen for the money. All right, and last and certainly not least on this list is the Conklin All-American. So on the original list, we had the Conklin Durograph, which is a very popular Conklin pen. The All-American is, I don't know, sort of like the big brother, I guess. It's a larger pen. It's more of a classic cigar shape as opposed to that flat top like you have on the Durograph. And there's a lot of interesting kind of material options that you get with the All-American. One thing that's definitely changed with all Conklin pens, including the All-American, is they have switched their nibs to German-made JoWo nibs. Definitely an upgrade from what they had before, and there is a flexible nib option as well. It's the only flex nib that we have on this list, which I think is pretty darn cool. There's not a whole lot of ornamentation with this pen, but it does have a really nice clip that has actually a spring kind of pressure bar that you can use if you're carrying it around in a pocket that has maybe a thicker material on it, it makes it a little easier to use that way. And then some of the different materials that this pen comes in, if you're getting a pen that's, one of the resin versions, even though it's a large pen, it's still gonna be relatively lightweight. So it's actually a great pen if you just prefer larger pens and you want something that doesn't tire out your hand too much. Going with something large but light is really great for that, especially if you have any type of arthritis or any type of hand issues where gripping small things or really heavy things is tough for you. This can be a really good pen for that. There are some classic colors as well as some pretty vibrant colors, and even some options for wood pens, really affordable wood pens. Typically you're into the hundreds of dollars for wood pens, but Conklin's got some decent options there. So I think that's really pretty neat, and it looks really, really good on this pen format. So all these things put together make it a really decent next level pen, because you just don't see many of these options in less expensive pens. So there you go. There's my updated list for next level pens in 2021. I would love to know what you think. Maybe you have some different experiences. Maybe you have different thoughts. Please let me know in the comments and share with others too, especially because I think we all have different experiences and preferences, and there's so many good pens out there that could probably fall into this category. These are just some of the ones that I thought were good. So I would love for you to let me know what you think. Be sure to check these pens and lots of others out at gouletpens.com. Please like, comment, share, subscribe, whatever you want. We're all here for you. The more you engage with our videos, the more we're going to continue to put out. Really appreciate the time that you spent with us today. Thank you so much for watching, and right on.